impact and its interaction with public perceptions, as well as broad strategic realities and foreign policy interests. Public perception and preferences are important to assess since they offer an insight into the efficacy of public diplomacy efforts and favorability of diplomatic positions and regional powers. They detail and nuance broad strategic realities that India and China contend with. And on the other hand, strategic realities contextualize and structure any analysis of how India and China compete. And the interplay of both perspectives as Nepal navigates an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape, with India and China competing for influence in it, is part of a framework that is necessary for us to add nuance to our understanding of what's unfolding not just in Nepal, but when refined as a template in South Asia as well. Now, this is the broad idea behind Orca's public opinion surveys in Nepal, which offer ground level views of how India and China engage with the public and the impact of their foreign policies. Orca began this initiative 2 years ago, and I conducted the survey last year. Our senior research associate, Omkar Bhole, has conducted the survey this year. And the last time I remember a public opinion survey was conducted that is related to the foreign policy of India and China in Nepal was more than 10 years ago by Gallup polls. And so Orca looked at this as an opportunity to add nuance and layer the existing analysis of India-China competition with some data and ground level insights. And the survey, of course, has its limitations like all research designs do in terms of scale and scope. But again, Orca is planning to expand the survey to more cities and to refine the methodology in the coming iterations. I want to take this opportunity to introduce our panelists. But in the interest of time, introductions of our panelists will be posted in the chat. And this will be available for those of us who've joined later as well. So I want to thank all of our panelists who have joined us today. I'm confident that they will contribute to an enriching discussion. First, I think how we'll go about this is speakers will deliver opening remarks for 7 minutes and then provide additional remarks for 4 to 5 minutes based on an interjection or a question that I provide. And then we will proceed with closing remarks and a question and answer session after that to conclude. Now, before I invite our panelists to deliver their remarks, I'll take a minute to set the stage for our discussion today by saying a few words on the... I'd request all participants to keep their mics muted so as to avoid any interruptions. Thank you. Before I invite our panelists to deliver their remarks, I'll just take a minute to say a few words on the significance of connectivity infrastructure and its function as a vector of influence. South Asia is one of the most infrastructure stressed regions of the world, and it's where the deficit in trade facilitation and connectivity infrastructure is felt very sharply in the domains of politics, diplomacy, and people's livelihoods. The provision of infrastructure, be it in the form of schools and hospitals, which contribute to human capital formation, or in the form of roadways and highways, railroads and highways, they facilitate economic growth and integration. Both are ways of cultivating interests and influence for regional powers. And so India and China compete to advance their interests and influence in places like Nepal and across the global south by deploying differing strategies that ultimately bundle the provision of infrastructure with public diplomacy, aid, and multilateral institutional engagement. Countries like Nepal, on the other hand, have become adept at finding a delicate balance between hedging and multi-alignment in order to navigate the contours of what has been called development diplomacy or infrastructure diplomacy. We've seen how railways, hydroelectric plants, airports, even libraries have become domains of contestation between India and China. And their provision and the performance of these efforts is entwined with dynamics of domestic politics and public opinion. We're also seeing that this is nested within diplomatic and development outreach, and it's evolving with the changing dynamics of Nepal's own foreign policy. At the same time, we're seeing that it is part of a broader South Asian blueprint of contestation and cooperation between regional powers and middle powers. With this, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Omkar Bhole, to deliver his remarks for around 7 minutes. Panelists should note that I will let you know when you have reached 6 minutes of speaking time by raising my hand using the emote options on Zoom. and then you can wrap up within a minute. Over to you, Omkar. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. Firstly, I would like to start by thanking Orca and NICE for organizing a discussion on such a pertinent topic, particularly in the context of recent events unfolding within Nepal, which only highlight the relevance of public perception and how it can influence government policies both domestically as well as in foreign policy aspects. My analysis today is based on the public perception survey project that Rahul mentioned in his opening remarks. In this year's iteration of the survey, I interviewed over 230 people in Kathmandu, particularly from the younger generation, on a range of topics including India and China's soft power influence to Nepal's preferred development and foreign policy partners. A detailed report of the survey can be found in the link sent in the chat box. So today I'll focus on some key observations from the survey which highlight the interplay between public perception in Nepal and its foreign policy decisions. I would also like to discuss few key focused areas for India's Nepal policy in the coming years, which can help India improve its position among Nepal's population. Firstly, I observed during the survey that Nepali people generally have more expectations from India than any other country, including China, owing to the long-standing cultural and emotional ties between India and Nepal, which are built on several commonalities in culture, language, religious practices, and so on. However, due to these close connections, it is witnessed that expectations that are not fulfilled by India often lead to immediate discontent, which then finds a place in Nepal's domestic political narratives, causing anti India sentiments sometimes. These popular anti India sentiments are also expressed through aligning with China against India's regional interests. I'll elaborate on this point in a bit. My second observation was that while cultural closeness still plays a key role in strengthening India-Nepal ties, economic opportunities offered by India for Nepali youth and workers have gained growing appeal amongst the Nepali people. These opportunities not just remain limited to bilateral trade, but also extend to employment avenues offered by India. So any disruption with with respect to these opportunities often create immediate ripple effects for India-Nepal relations. The discontent in Nepal against the introduction of India's Agnipath scheme in 2022 is one such example in recent years, which can potentially affect the livelihoods of several Gorkha soldiers recruited in the Indian army. The practice, which has been halted since 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and later due to the lack of consensus among both governments on the Agnipath scheme. In this regard, while Nepal must understand that any decision on India's military recruitment remains an exclusive prerogative of the Indian government, both sides can also consider launching skill training initiatives for the Gorkha community to ensure that their livelihoods are not drastically affected and this issue does not sustain as a thorn in the bilateral relations. Similarly, the anti-India narratives around the 2015 blockade can be considered as a critical moment for shifting popular perception in Nepal. The memories of the blockade are often associated with India, which often overshadows India's comprehensive assistance provided to Nepal during the earthquake in the same year. This period not only proved to be a low point in India-Nepal ties, but also prompted many Nepali people to look at China as a serious economic partner to avoid overdependence on India, which largely shaped Nepal's pro-China foreign policy since then. The fuel agreement with China, along with the trade and transit agreement in 2016, are just a few examples of this policy shift. Hence, as also argued in my issue brief I mentioned earlier, this lack of capacity on the part of India to effectively manage public sentiments during such crisis scenarios often provides advantage for China to expand its footprint in Nepal. Therefore, while one may argue that every relation between neighboring countries would naturally undergo periodical ups and downs, India's Nepal policy must ensure that transparency is maintained not just at the government level, but also at the people's level, especially during these contentious times, to avoid any gains for other countries at the expense of India's interests. Lastly, I would like to mention about India's visibility in Nepal, which still remains disproportionate to its development cooperation efforts undertaken. For instance, people I interviewed during my survey could easily name 3 to 4 Chinese funded projects undertaken in Kathmandu, such as the Basantpur Tower reconstruction, Kathmandu Ring Road, and so on, but did not feel that confident while naming big ticket India funded projects. This perception emanates not just from China's dedicated efforts to improve its visibility, but is also correlated by Nepali people to India's delivery deficit, which does not bode well for India's image. Despite this, overwhelmingly large majority of Nepali people believe India to be its preferred development partner, despite China's image building strategies and its own economic clout. One of the major reasons behind this is India's consultation-led approach that takes into account needs of the local population, which ultimately maximize benefits for the Nepali people. On the contrary, China's investments often lead to other concerns such as the corruption, cost overruns, environmental issues, which ultimately affect the overall effectiveness of these projects. India must leverage this advantage by further improving on its visibility and project delivery to ensure that India continues to significantly contribute to Nepal's economic development. I'll stop here for now and look forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Omkar, for those very insightful remarks. I think your point about the anti-India sentiment that stems from the 2015 earthquake, its effect continues to be felt even today, and I think that's highly prescient for any diplomatic strategy or development diplomacy effort. Just a quick interjection for you to think on and for us to pick up later in the second round of remarks. You mentioned in your opening remarks that the recent protests that we are seeing in Nepal, they are very revealing of the sort of public discontent with governance as well as development outcomes. How does India contend with these emerging dynamics? How does India engage with Nepal's relatively new political system and sort of address the performance and governance deficits that appear to be the main issue of interest? You may again, you may pick up this question in the next round of remarks and discuss some other points as well if you like. I think we would invite Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt to deliver his remarks, but I don't think he's joined us yet. So I think we'll move forward, and I'll ask Dr. Amit Ranjan to deliver his remarks. Dr. Ranjan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rahul, and thank you, ORC, for inviting me. I read this piece by Dr. Bhole, Omkar Bhole. It's wonderful research, and especially you won't find many people going to Nepal or any other South Asian countries, talking to people, talking to common people, and then looking at what's the perception about A country, B country, or C country. So it's a wonderful work and really appreciate this. Coming to my uh, brief introductory remarks, the perception and misperception people are now very familiar with, and now scholars are working on it. It became more popular after the classic work by Robert Jervis in 1976, and scholars started looking at the behavior of individuals, behavior of state, behavior of population, and sometimes it happens that when classical realists came into picture, they started talking about how the domestic players, how the domestic factors play an important role in making of a foreign policy. So in this time, where the domestic uh, factor play important role, it's always better to look at what the perception. But saying this, sometimes what happens that perception and misperception may not lead you to a correct foreign policy or correct policy. Sometimes it backfires also because people's behavior keep on changing. And in South Asia, if you look at the South Asia, India's domestic politics have always played a bigger role, especially dealing with the border countries like Tamil Nadu. Politics played important role in dealing with the Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bengal, then part of UP, Bihar, Nepal, then Punjab, Pakistan, Jammu Kashmir, Pakistan. So they have played. If you look at the India-Nepal relations and perception, it has kept on changing. In 1970, the first economic blockade, second 1989, and the third 2015-16. There was a in 1989 there was a after this blockade. No, before 1989, yeah, 1989. There were some studies done, and that made Nepalese to understand that we have to look for other options also. In 2015-16, there was also again a study, and it concluded the same thing that we have to look after another option. And 2017, 2018, we find that Nepal's growing ties with China. So it did become more closer, and it was the sometimes what happens that we say that it's a political elite who decides the foreign policy, but they cannot decide in a vacuum. There is some support. There must be some support from the population. So China was present there, and then this happened, the economic blockade. Then, if you look at the boundary matter, there was a big in 2018, 2019. There was a protest against India. Even the popular film actress, when Manisha Koirala, she wrote some message and how she was told and everything has done, and that also by Swaraj Kaushal, the former governor and husband of Sushma Swaraj, late Foreign Minister of India. Then the recent death of a Nepalese student in KIIT. So these things always, you know, it we some parts of India you may not feel that this is a big thing, but it always haunts the people. They always remember it. So these things always play a role in making a perception. So that's what I say. That perception and misperception, they are not permanent. They keeps on changing. It depends on how you deal, how the relation type pick up. Now, question: how when you studied that uh, thing, this in for your insight, uh, does people's perception influence policymakers in Nepal, and if how much? That's a big question. It's a big question because when you talk about the people, who are the people? What sort of people you look forward? Because everywhere with a multi-party democratic system, there are groups. So they have supporters, there are opponents. So how is it a consensus, or is it just a supporter, a few groups supporting the government, and then they are saying that you have to do this, and the government is going that. So when you look at the perception, misperception, you look at the whose perception, whose misperception, and how much they play the role. When you come to the China, India, China is a big country, more money. One thing we have to realize from last 20 years, we are talking about the Chinese presence, China's extension in South Asia. China is present in South Asia and it is going to stay here. What we have to do, what India has to do, it has to make its policy more effective. So it's India job to make more its policies more effective, which people in South Asia, the South Asian countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, Maldives, and other countries, they accept it. The acceptability level has to be increased because you cannot every time say that China is coming, or China's presence, or China is a competitor, or China is a threat to India influence in South Asia. It's going to be there. And from last 20, 25 years, we are discussing this and nothing had changed. So it's the India has to make changes. We have to look at where we have made mistakes, and we don't have to repeat those mistakes. You know, then if you look at the case of Nepal, a small country, when you talk about the common culture, common religion, we still have a dispute. We have to realize, we have to recognize those disputes and settle down in those disputes. So, what I believe that in that situation, India has to work, act as a leader. You know, who can lead the because if you look at insight also or many other, they say that India is a hegemon. Uh, Theoretically speaking, when you look at the John Mearsheimer's work, except US, not a single country across the world is a hegemon, regional hegemon. This is what say a theoretical level, but people they use the word okay the regional hegemon or something like that, but theoretically except US, that also in its own region, and now the hegemony is being challenged within the region, but what I say that Trump period. Uh, so and then Sushma Swaraj that time I was listening to her long time back, and she said that we are elder brother, not a big brother, elder brother. So when you behave like elder brother, you behave like you have to make changes. When you feel that this policy is not working, so it's better to make some changes, make some amendments, and then uh, uh, go forward to deal with the issue. But most importantly, what I believe, and I conclude that the disputes, whatever little disputes or big disputes, that has to be settled. Differences have to be single iron out between the India and Nepal. And third, what I say that China is going to be there. We have to look at the policies which are more acceptable to a large section of population, large section of Nepali. And finally, you talked about the perception. Sometimes what happens that even common Indian or common man from India or women from India, they make some statement, and those statements may feel that this may not hurt or this may not going to play what foreign policy making now, it's not only limited to the government institution or MEA or PMO or something. It's also about how people look at them. It's also, when you say, when your social media flooded with something or something against Nepal, or your Facebook or your X or Instagram flooded with something which is which people say against Nepal, it affects people. Note or take a note of all such things, like what happened during the case, case when the two women, two teachers, and they made a statement, and that was noted. That was noted. It's not like, but and that creates, that creates a feeling when you say that so-called anti-India or anti-Nepal, that feeling is there. So I will stop here, and if you have any commentary, let me know.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan. Excellent remarks. Just a couple of things right off the top there. What you said, the theoretical underpinnings that you provide for perception and misperception, I think they're essential background as well as sort of a framework for us to understand the context in which public opinion is studied. And you raise an important point about how political decisions about foreign policy are taken with the public reaction in mind. So that does public perceptions and opinions and responses does condition foreign policy in that way as well, and sort of asking that question in a variety of ways, keeping in mind who's opposing it and who's supporting it. Those are they bring a greater level of insight to our understanding. I think a question that comes to mind, Dr. Ranjan, is that India's public diplomacy perhaps does not have the same visibility in terms of the largeness that China's does. So, for instance, during the surveys that we conducted, the most clear difference that people pointed out was that China's efforts of being public diplomacy efforts were highly visible, and they were projected and as a larger and bigger presence. How do you think India's public diplomacy strategy can overcome this perception of not being as big? And what policy measures in terms of branding or projection can be implemented to enhance the visibility of India's development outreach? I think we'll leave that there, and I'll turn to Ms. Shivam Shekhawat to deliver her remarks. But just before I ask Ms. Shekhawat to give her remarks, I'd like to request the team at NICE to please once again reach out to their scholar, Dr. Deepak, and make every effort in that direction. Shivam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rahul, and thank you to the team at Orca and NICE for inviting me to the session. And my greatest congratulations to Omkar for your survey. I've read both the iterations. So the previous one also, I remember last year going through the survey findings, and it was actually very beneficial as somebody who looks at Nepal. So many congratulations for that. In terms of my presentation, so I've been asked to look at prospects of India's development diplomacy in Nepal and the BRI challenge. So my emphasis would be more on what exactly is the BRI challenge in Nepal for India in terms of the public diplomacy. But I think I'll just briefly give an overview of India's own development relationship with Nepal, some of which Dr. Rajan also mentioned. So there's obviously, we all understand that India's relationship with Nepal is premised that it's a long-standing special relationship where development cooperation is considered, I think, as a central tenet of this partnership. The fact that the two sides have an open border and there's like a very affinity in terms of cultural and social relations that allows for greater economic and economic integration between the people of the two countries. While over the years, obviously, there have been certain irritants which have kind of affected the bilateral relationship. I think the overall long-standing trust that the people of the two countries have with each other, while it has gone through ups and downs, it has been there, it has remained, and I think that is a major, I think, that could be considered like a major point of, a point on which this bilateral relationship has the scope of being improved further. In terms of India's development partnership, we understand that India is the number one trade partner of Nepal. There are concerns about trade deficit from the Nepalese side, but there are regular efforts to kind of act on that. In terms of investment as well, I think India's the total FDI stock in Nepal is the highest from India. So that also gives that also reflects the importance that both sides attach to the partnership. India's development cooperation has focused on infrastructure development, and I think that has also been a regular feature. That has been an important point that your survey also highlights, that there's a lack of visibility in terms of India's big projects as opposed to China's projects, which are deemed more visible in the country. So I think that's something that we'll take up in the subsequent minutes. But I think India's development cooperation does focus on infrastructure development. India has contributed. India has given grants for a lot of big development projects in the country, like the Tribhuvan Airport and the East-West Highway. Then there are connectivity projects. I think connectivity is also an important element of the bilateral relationship. There's been cross-border railway links which have become operational now in 2022, 2023. There are consistent efforts to kind of build up on that as well. I think one area which is now seeing much more progress, and especially since last year when Indian External Affairs Minister was in Nepal, is like energy sector connectivity. So the agreement signed between India and Nepal for the transfer of 10,000 megawatt of electricity to India, but also India's role as kind of facilitating the transfer of electricity from Nepal to Bangladesh, and the implications that it would have for sub-regional connectivity. I think that also is a significant development in the bilateral relationship. Apart from that, India has consistently worked with Nepal in the health sector, in the education sector. A lot of students from Nepal and working professionals from Nepal come to India in terms of more opportunities and getting more skills. I think at the grassroots level, the high impact community development projects, which in 2023 they completed like almost 2 decades of and they've been very successful in terms of ensuring that India's engagement with at the grassroots level with the local communities. So I think these are also very big testaments of India's engagement with Nepal. India has also acted as a first responder in terms of any crisis-ridden situations in the country, be it natural disasters or the COVID pandemic in 2020. So I think in terms of like India's overall bilateral relationship with Nepal, there have been, despite the irritants that have persisted, there have been some areas which have been consistently focused upon by both sides, irrespective of who is in power in either Nepal or India. But I think before I delve further into what issues does India's public diplomacy face in Nepal, I would just like to focus on what challenge does the BRI pose to, I think, India's public diplomacy efforts. So, as we all, it's common understanding that BRI, since the signing of the framework agreement in 2017, and the BRI initially had a list of 9 projects which were supposed to be completed under the program. Till now, none of the projects have been completed. Last year in December 2024, another framework cooperation agreement was signed between the two sides, and there was, I think, some sort of an understanding in terms of clarifying the issues regarding BRI's funding and the fact that Nepal is more keen on getting more grants from China instead of loans. But I think that is still not very much clarified. There is still a basic understanding that the issues about funding will be taken on a project to project basis. But I think I would not delve more into what the status of the projects had been. But my idea here is to emphasize more on how China has been using BRI as kind of, to kind of make its presence, make itself more visible in Nepal, but not in terms of just hard infrastructure projects. So I think when we look at the success of BRI in Nepal, it's important for us to see that BRI over the last few years, China's emphasis has shifted from hard infrastructure projects towards soft infrastructure projects. So I see China's success in public diplomacy efforts in Nepal in terms of institutionalizing and repackaging a lot of the things that it was already doing under the ambit of the BRI, which kind of helps it to kind of, consolidating its approach towards Nepal. So last year in June 2023, last year in June 2023, there was some controversy around the inauguration of the Pokhara International Airport and how China co-opted it under the BRI. And soon after that, what followed was that I think there was a festival, a dragon boat festival, which was supposed to happen, which was also co-opted under the public diplomacy effort initiative of the BRI. This followed then the Silk Roadster platform, under which China's focus has been on kind of, leveraging the people-to-people and political ties between the two countries and kind of bringing that under the ambit of the BRI as well. So I think these efforts by China consistently over the years allows it, I think this first creates some ambiguity in terms of what exactly comes under the BRI, but then it also allows China to absolve from the responsibility of actually seeing whether if there's been any progress on the hard infrastructure efforts and just focus on the soft power initiatives, which it has already been successfully doing. So for example, China has consistent links with the political parties in Nepal, be it the communist parties, but also other parties. They call Nepali political parties to the country to kind of familiarize themselves with China's political system. A lot of students are kind of invited for these development these initiatives to kind of familiarize themselves with China's polity. Then a lot of the cultural centers and Confucius institutes, which were already functioning in Nepal, but now which have kind of been brought under the ambit of the BRI, these also allow China to kind of engage with the people at the ground level. So the work in terms of like the actual output that has already been done over the years. But I think the fact that it is now being clubbed under the BRI, or it is now being sold as the fact that China is institutionalizing it further, it does help it in, getting like more of an advantage in terms of making itself seem visible or reflect, like showing that the BRI is successful in the country. So I see that you raised your hand, so I'm assuming my time is up, but maybe I could take it up in the subsequent round of questions. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Shivam. Again, excellent remarks. Really a lot to get into there. I think the first thing you mentioned is that the social cultural relations that exist between India and China, they're a sort of a ballast and a stabilizing pillar in India-Nepal relations, which I think is important context for any conversation about India-Nepal relations. And I think there's, like you said, India does provide a lot of grants and development assistance. The high impact community development program is the cornerstone of all of India's development assistance and a highly successful template for how to engage in South Asia. And you also did mention the Pokhara airport. I think very recently there was a parliamentary panel inquiry into the corruption surrounding the Pokhara airport, and a lot of interesting things have come up and a lot of challenges for a country like China to navigate when it does business or engage with Nepal and countries in South Asia. The question, I think, my question would be, is related to the dynamics of development diplomacy, which is currently an environment in flux. So the China's BRI has been repurposed as has been refocused in terms of small but beautiful projects, just as they have agreed to a BRI implementation framework. On the other hand, you have the US MCC Nepal Compact program and the funding for which has been suspended. There's no resolution in sight at the moment. And in the context of Nepal's BRI, will the Kathmandu-Kerong railway line and projects like the Trans-Himalayan Multidimensional Connectivity Network, will they lose steam? How do you expect India's development diplomacy responding to these opportunities and challenges? Something to pick up in the second round of remarks. I think Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt has joined us. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bhatt. Dr. Deepak, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Dr. Deepak. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for joining us. You may proceed with your initial remarks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ORCA, and NICE. Both the team, as you have been doing excellent work. In fact, I was stuck in a traffic and then some other stuff, which I apologize for my late joining you all, but I couldn't heard the previous speakers. And so it will be slightly bit difficult to me to correlate with what you have been presenting and discussing. In fact, the balancing the public perception as the topic given to me here, in terms of like the amidst India, China, like the competition or the strategic rivalry or the realities in Nepal. Sometimes when we compare, Nepal is only the country we compare to some extent is Mongolia. Two giant great powers or the becoming superpowers, upper superpower is Mongolia, because China and Russia are there. And here more, like the province, the Inner Mongolia, China has is very similar things in their terms. Ours case is slightly different, like quantifying the Nepal-India relation in terms of the monetary assistance, in terms of the development efforts or the assistance, and all these things are sometimes a bit difficult. And what we, have been talking for many, in terms of given theories of the international relations or the grand strategy or the geopolitics, the problem here is it's the relation between Nepal and India is unique itself. All the great powers, even we talk about the great British Empire, which was described as that the sun never set because God couldn't trust in the Englishman in the dark was a definition, and then American system, the Washington Consensus, between with institutions, on all these things have ruled for last more than 7 decades or have dominated the world. But all these have not, dismantled the Nepal-India relations. And what is the peculiarity of that? And if you talk about the violence, non-violence, racism, and all these things, are reality of the world in a long run. But mixed religions, cultural, religious, and all these things are here. So, and if you want to look at the the depth of the relation, that we can link it with the Nepalese Gorkha, are the part of the Indian statecraft or the core, like the defense system or the security system of the India. And I mean, we can again link it to the British Gorkha also, but that is slightly different. So when it comes to the Indian aid to Nepal, Yes, of course, there Indian, like India-Nepal relations, and in terms of like economic, if you look at trade imbalance, how Nepal will deal the the challenges coming in the trade imbalance in the days to come is a big challenge, and that is not for only Nepal. So like if you look at the Indian citizens coming here, Indian like the workers coming here, and the open porous border and the movement of the people and the security regime, all these things are there. So while linking it to the like the balancing act of the public perception between China and India, or like the Indian China rivalry somewhere, like the the strategic realities that we are linking it between the competition between these two uh, international players. I think it depends how they will move ahead. 1947 and 1949, two are the specific dates, like making the 100th year of the independence of the colonialism and 100th year of Communist Party revolution in China. So these two dates, when they want to declare them as a superpower, but where will be Nepal? So Nepali society, if you link it with the like the Gangetic Plains, all the rivers going down, movement of the people is again, as I mentioned earlier. So this is where we have to look at the uh, two countries' relations, and that like the competition. I don't see there is a competition because that's their priority. Priority of China is slightly different, as it's already like uh, uh, clear-cut international player in terms of its invest outside China, but India is in the ray of like becoming a regional and global actor. So if you look at the Nepali society and its conflict, different kinds, latent and the conflict in the natural resources, conflict in the society in terms of like different facets of society, which is very like linked with Indian society and India. So Nepal, India as linked from the 19 like for centuries, but in the recent modern state mechanisms, 1950 treaty and different agreements and implementations. If you look at the trade today, like the media, we can see that. And when coming to the like the strategic realities, Nepal have to have a very good relation and like the engagements with India at the same time with like without recalling the we have like the uh, leveled like the economic repercussions or the economic levies to the Tibet era. That is not the reality now, and I think like amidst this this competition, as nature have given the limitations to the China, Nepal-China relations, but like investing in some all the Chinese companies as they are coming to the Nepal's development scenario, they're coming with the fair competitions. I mean, calibrated fair competitions, and the one thing the Nepalese statecraft or the peoples have been blaming India is like for the delaying of the development project, which is directly related to the people's day-to-day life. If you look at the Hulaki road from eastward, the south from the east-west highway, and for a long time there are many disturbances. And who are the making disturbances? And that can be contractors or like the petty contractors, all these people, and which is very similar to the Chinese development projects, and that is because of the lack of good governance, the corruption cases and all these things that is happening more with Chinese also, the Chinese development or the companies or the development projects. But in reality, uh, development projects dealt by India also remain in limbo also. One example is Hulaki Road. There are many others. So at present, I think, like as I mentioned earlier, without quantifying, which is very difficult in terms of relations, uh, now the competition between India and China, leaving aside from Nepali perspective, or like including their role and their contribution. Sometimes what we see, what China is doing in Nepal is all against India. And if so, then what's India-China engagements? 1962 onwards, up to 1988, these two countries, as from Nepal's perspective, have not been engaged. But in the recent last 30 years plus, or in the recent time, their own relation have is, sometimes is in the jeopardy, and sometimes it's in the recent is improving. And so linking it with that from my Nepali perspective, Nepal should get benefit of the improving relations between India, China, and especially the dependency, the multifaceted and cumulative dependency with India is must. And sometimes people look at from the security perspective, geopolitical perspective, and the strategic perspective. That's not needed between Nepal and India. Yes, it's needed for only when it comes to the regime and statecraft. And so most of the cases, two
Dr.
things
Deepak,
keep it.
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Deepak, but I'll ask you to wrap up here, and maybe you can pick up the rest in the second round of questions.
I'm wrapping it within 30 seconds. Two things I keep,
Yes, yeah.
mentioning about the, the relation with Nepal and India, and Nepal and China. One is the dependency factor, the trade factor, and the era of, the deglobalization or the decoupling of the, which is seen as to Nepal have to look at its the economic resource mobilization or the human resource mobilization to keep its eye on balancing the disbalanced trade with India, and in the long run, engaging of the strategic relation with both the different civilizational great power at the moment, but the future superpowers is more, even when it's again, we need some national economic activities. Without that, it will be difficult to face the challenges in the days to come. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. I think some very interesting points about how Nepal will deal with some very pressing questions in its economic relationship with India and China, especially related to the trade deficit, which I think applies to both India and China when it comes to Nepal's trade relations. I think one of the questions that you can probably pick up and address in the second round of remarks is that in light of the US tariff policies that are targeting not only China, but also key partners like India, how should Nepal navigate its economic and diplomatic positioning to avoid becoming collateral in great power competition, especially when both India and China are recalibrating their own regional strategies under economic pressure? So this is something that I think was one of the questions that was posed in the registration by one of our participants, and I think it's relevant here. So and very contemporary. So I think Dr. Deepak, you can address this in your second round of remarks. So I think we can begin with, I'll invite Omkar to begin with his second round of remarks, and I'll request all our panelists to keep their remarks to under 4 minutes. Thank you. Omkar, over to you.
Thank you, Rahul. Also, thank you to Dr. Ranjan and Ms. Shivam for appreciating the survey work. We hope to continue and build on the same in coming years. Now, coming to the moderator's question on recent protests in Nepal. It is certainly true that there is a popular discontent among people against the government, expressed more visibly in the past few months. But as per my readings, it would not be completely accurate to merely call it pro-monarchy protest. One thing we need to understand here is that this protest is not led by a homogeneous group, but rather it includes stakeholders representing different interests and have variety of issues against the government. Besides a pro-monarchy group represented by the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party or the RPP, and few other self-interest groups, most people have genuine concerns arising from the constant political instability in Nepal, which leads to gaps in policy execution. corruption among political elites, and the consequent slow economic development path. Popular support for these protests is largely motivated with an aim to bring reforms in Nepal's governance rather than overthrowing the democratic setup, which itself was achieved through people's movements in the early 1990s and again in mid 2000s. Now, people in Nepal also believe that these frequent political changes also have implications for Nepal's foreign policy decisions. For instance, the survey which we conducted showed that a large section of population blames political instability in Nepal for the delay in the implementation of BRI projects. Obviously, along with other reasons such as unviability of the projects, as well as Nepal's awareness about the BRI pitfalls globally. The same logic sometimes also applies to delays in India-led projects in Nepal, as in the case of Pancheshwar project. Nonetheless, India still achieved a considerable success compared to China in implementing projects by maneuvering different political parties and different stakeholders in Nepal. Another important issue in this regard is India's perception in Nepal as an entity that supports monarchy. While these claims are constantly being denied by the Indian government at different levels, India also must reach out directly to Nepali people through an effective public diplomacy strategy to avoid turning this perception into any policy decision that can affect India's interest in the long run. In fact, India is in a much better position to assist Nepal in resolving some of the governance gaps which has caused these protests in the past few months by sharing its own successful governance initiatives in digital public infrastructure, employment generation schemes, public distribution system, and so on. This will not only help Nepal to get its economy back on track after the COVID-19 pandemic, but also avoid any public perception fallout for India from this ongoing crisis in Nepal. Also, the last point, people's dissatisfaction with the economic development in Nepal implies that they would be more reliant on development cooperation from other countries, especially from India. As I mentioned in my previous remarks also that majority of Nepali population consider India to be its preferred development partner. Thus, I believe India must leverage this opportunity to remove the bottlenecks in its development assistance with Nepal and build a more robust partnership with Nepal that not just rely on historical connections, but also bring more positive, tangible results for Nepali people. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Omkar, for keeping for some excellent remarks and as well as keeping your remarks to under 4 minutes. I'll invite Dr. Ranjan to address to take up the next second round
Well,
of remarks.
you asked me about India's public diplomacy. Why is it not visible? If you look at the public diplomacy, China is more visible. We don't have to do much thing because we have many things common, and most of the like look at the Bollywood films in Nepal or uh, culture ties, religious ties. So we follow the same thing. We even eat the same food, then cross-border movement. The issue is that, sometimes I feel means even, India has one problem, India, Nepal, or India has one problem, is that we are too close and we are part of everyday life of South Asian. So that is good also, and that often creates a problem also. That has because we engage with everyday life. If you look at the Chinese, they don't engage with everyday life of the Nepalese or Bangladeshi. They have the place where they engage, they interact, and then they leave. But we have engage on the everyday basis. That creates a issue. Despite having so much commonalities and so much similarness we have. Then a second thing we want to mention that talked about MCC thing. If you look at the this is also an opportunity for India because MCC money has been paused and also the US has withdrawn some assistance from Nepal. they are in pause position, but I don't think they are going to US is going to pay assist in same way as it used to be in pre Donald Trump era. So who is going to fill this void? So in Nepal, China is there. Japan may be an option. So if this is also a situation where India can move on and India can try to fill the gap. I'm not saying that fill the gap, but at least try to fill some gap. Because those MC projects and MCC and also the other systems, that huge project, USAID that affect that. Then if you look at the position of India and China, especially looking at the security level and looking at uh, everywhere, you don't have to compete. You don't have to compete for influence. Only second Trump started, he visited China, but why did he come to India? When you talk to people, they say that he has never been invited. So why there's sometimes these creates unnecessary fuss between the relation between the two countries. So and then there was a Nepalese media 3 days back. There was a lots of news coming up, and it is saying that Mr. Modi may be invited for the Sagarmatha dialogue, which is going to in I think in 3 days time. Uh, and it was also reported that Oli is going to invite him during a BIMSTEC meeting. But then report came that Mr. Modi is busy and also busy, so he could not attend. And then he went to uh, Kathmandu and during some event he gave a speech, and during that speech he said many things, and that hinted that everything is not good between him and Mr. Modi when they met. So these things, these creates unnecessary, issues or unnecessary problem. And finally, I say that, as I said, that those problems, disputes like maybe small or border or other differences, that has to be ironed out. That has to be that has to be if you come talk and just deal with that, resolve those issues, because these are these may be considered to be a small issue. People may say that okay, so one issue is not a big issue, but still it's a problem. It's a problem. It creates differences. Sometimes it creates a strain between people, especially between people from the two countries. And finally, what I say, especially is give respect to all South Asians. Give respect to all South Asians and treat them with respect and treat them as an equal partner, not as a something like this is not from the government. This is for the individuals from one country, especially those who are from on the upper side of the India. So treat them equally and treat them.
Thank you, Dr.
I just
Anjan.
one point I want to. I just one
Yeah.
point. I just want to add that sometimes when something happens, people start making their statements, start saying something on an issue. It's in diplomacy and other way also. It's always better to stay quiet also, because staying quiet is also a part of diplomacy, and that also is a part of good diplomacy. So if something happened in Nepal, if something is going between Nepal and China, you don't have to rush. You don't have to start. You don't have to make some TV panel, and then start shouting at each other. So you don't have to do that. You just wait. Remember, whatever happened, what I said that China is there, but still India has a big presence in South Asia, and nobody can deny this, and nobody can replace India. So China is there; it's going to stay there, but India still remains as a big presence. So you don't have to worry a lot. You just have to look at the policies and issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Anjan. I think very sound advice about not rushing to respond to every small issue that might erupt. I'll turn to Shivam. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So I think you asked me two questions. So the first part of it was where do I see like the Kerung Kathmandu railway or the overall the trans multidimensional like project progressing. So I think what we have to understand about large-scale infrastructure projects, irrespective of whether it is led by something initiated by China or India or US for that matter, I think some concerns are invariably the same for all of these projects. So I think and these concerns relate to, the geography of Nepal in general. So or concerns related to land use, or concerns related to road access, the environmental factors. So a lot of these big ticket infrastructure projects have been facing these issues. In addition to this, particularly for the Kerun Kathmandu Railway, I think currently it's in the last final phase of the geological survey is happening at the moment, and I think it's expected to be done by the feasibility study is expected to be done by June next year. After that, there would be another, the process for the detailed project report would start, and then that is also a very long process. So in terms of that, in any way, being expedited in the aftermath of the MC, there being like a pause over the MCC, I don't see that as happening, because I think that would be mutually exclusive. But I think in terms of, yes, as soon as the news about this pause on US aid, and then the news about the pause on MCC came up, there were murmurs about, whether China would be willing to now proactively, increase its presence in Nepal, considering the fact that it was so vehemently opposed to the MCC at the first place. But I think China's, I don't see anything, and that kind of aligns with Dr. Ranjan said in terms of, not rushing to it. I mean, I do see that we would see like high-handed rhetoric from China in terms of saying that how the, because obviously the stoppage on aid has kind of created this perception about, the Nepalese people feeling that the trust that they posed in terms of the US actually helping them in building transmission lines or in developing their roads, that has kind of been breached for now. And even though it is a temporary stop, I do not see the work resuming anytime soon. And the fact that the MCC was a time-based grant, that also creates certain complexities. So I think in that sense, from China, I do not see any additional need to rush in terms of increasing its engagement in the material terms. But I think it would be more in the rhetorical and, in terms of kind of making a case for its own reliability as opposed to the US. I think in terms of India, in the MCC as well, some of the transmission lines which were being built, obviously a lot of them were supposed to kind of help India in the cross-border trade as well. So obviously those are also affected. So India, it is kind of disadvantageous for India in that sense. But I think over the last years, what we have seen is that a growing willingness from India to kind of work with other countries in South Asia, be it the US or other countries like Japan or any other country. So I think for India, for now, I think it's important to see how this work stop kind of evolves over the months. But I think it does provide India some space in terms of, keeping its own commitment towards Nepal consistent. Because I think for an economy like Nepal's, which is dependent on aid to an extent, when decisions like these happen, it kind of raises fears about how, their development or their progress is kind of hinged on some political decision taken, like an abrupt political decision taken somewhere else, and that kind of then derails the trust that they have. So I think in terms of that, India has the opportunity to kind of keep its own efforts or keep its own initiatives consistent in Nepal, whatever some of which were highlighted, but I think all the other speakers as well, the bureaucratic issues, the bottlenecks which India's infrastructure projects face in Nepal, I think India should kind of make an effort to work towards addressing them. And maybe that way, I think it would lead to like a much more I think that would kind of increase India's positive perception in Nepal, and also help Nepal tide through this time when, there are fears about maybe if the MCC does not resume, obviously that would have some implications in terms of the overall infrastructure development of the country. So I think that way India could come in. Yeah.
Thank you, Shivam. Very interesting points there. Very valid points. I'll turn to Dr. Deepak. You may make your secondary remarks for, I think, 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. In fact, I couldn't hear Omkar and Dr. Amit, Ranjan, and Shivam in the first round. So my loud thinking and understanding about, again, first the thing is Nepal-India relations. What Nepal is struggling is for the its own problems, which is equality, some kind of prosperity, like the big notion of prosperity, stability, and all these things. And there are discriminations, all these things are there. But in terms of Nepal-India relation, I want to like, it's not, like called the national aim or something like that, but fundamental thing, which is I want to relate, focusing on assistance where it should go, like health, education, which really Nepali society needs, and through like infrastructure and all these things. And in terms of strategic engagements, that is slightly like not trust with the common people, which always they feel that there is something that which India has been handling, or high-handedness and all these things. Uh, we keep talking about like the civilizational, religion, cultural, all these relations, but diversity and deeper relations, but uh, principally, and does these things or these factors like fully respect to the people or engage the people? No, inclusivity and all these things slightly different in Nepali context. So relating it with like always keeping, I mean, now as I heard, like three speakers in their second round, we all are linking the US effect. Yes, USAID and all these things. And what the global, like the other globalization, USAID, IMF, World Bank, all these have been talking about in the last all the uh, 7 decades plus. And what Nepal-India relations is rely on is like the more on like again linguistic, cultural on one hand, but not limited to that, is related to the like the somewhere the prosperity and path of development. So to ensure that uh, for that and closely linking kind of like the equality in society, which are like more concerned, more related, women, Dalit, like marginalized groups. It's big challenge for Nepali society, like in terms of like addressing the community's demands and taking the development path somewhere. So in that regard, India, minus like in South Asia, leave the Pakistan, as India Pakistan have a long rivalry with the like the wars, whatever is that. But what's the relation with India? In a broad sense, like in terms of uh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh. So these countries, diversifying country-specific affairs. Let's do some actions where India can take advantages of that, and these countries also can, like take advantages of that directions, like other direction. What India has, like the really taken to become a world, like the not only the regional but to the like to ensure the uh, uh, broader, broader relation or the presence. That's my like point. And the and my concluding like point or the remark is like, I think every society needs equality in that sense, like for and that prosperity or some kind of uh, respect, and that approach is missing somewhere in Nepal India relations. So let's think and that like the refueling or rebalancing USAID presence, global debate is that who is going to fulfill the that gap. Many people have started talking about, okay, China, it's already there somewhere like that. But in Nepal's case, Nepal is gradually, Nepal's approach is always like the uh, balancing, trying balancing, like it's not in just talking and balancing, needs some uh, balanced nuances in its foreign policy, security policy, and of course the development policy. So focusing on development activities, let's more focus. The approach should be focused on the uh, not only the political stability. I don't link it with want to link it with the recent trends as like manifested by frustrated national frustration mood, lacking in the development kind of exodus that youths are leaving country. Uh, that I want to again link with the donkey roots, donkey kind of, like the movie Donkey, what I have mentioned about the Indian society also. So it's not a big question. It's happening everywhere in a different way. So finally, coming to the factors that have been challenged uh, to the uh, national path and then India-Nepal relation or the Nepal-India relations, we can cope up with that, address these kind of problems, and get benefit of that. As Nepal is young federal democratic republic, and challenges are coming within because of the because of corruption, or like the malgovernance or the lack of the good governance. That's internal problem. So let's explore for betterment of the regional India's presence, and like benefit of that would be like they spread it in the effectively spread it in the continent, subcontinent.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. Very, very relevant remarks. I think this is where we'll close the session where speakers provide their individual remarks. I thank you all for your remarks, and I'll just quickly recap what's been discussed before we get into the Q&A session very quickly. So, India and China's competition for influence and their strategies for advancing their interests have to contend with a variety of local dynamics in the domain of the people's livelihoods in terms of trade and economic expectations and balances, domestic political pressures, and so on. And it's produced a very interesting and engaging environment, which our speakers have explored, they've detailed and analyzed. And amidst this competition for influence, public opinion, public diplomacy, they've emerged as key factors that shape the narrative around India and China's participation. And it has resonance in the global south as well. That's something I think we need to keep in mind. So therefore, effectively deploying public diplomacy strategies will invariably shape the perceptions of India and China. And increasingly, it's becoming important to consider how Nepal sees itself and its own foreign policy, the kinds of refinements and realignments that it undertakes. They're increasingly determinant of the success or failure of India and China's outreach. Nepal's own development aspirations and national interests are becoming increasingly relevant for how foreign policy and development diplomacy is conducted by India and China. India's foreign policy in Nepal is conditioned to a certain extent, by China's growing engagement in the region, but it has its own logic, its own calculus. It's introduced a competitive dynamic into the equation, which has encompassed all kinds of development goals and outcomes. Calibrating this competition while retaining the independent objectives of India's foreign policy outreach in South Asia is a difficult but necessary balance to strive for. And I think finally, development outcomes are how the global south increasingly measure the efficacy of engagement, be it with partners like China, India, Japan, any of the Quad members, and being able to deliver on these economic aspirations of the populations as well as political elites is important. And it's equally important to showcase and project these deliverables in an effective manner and create the favorable conditions for future engagements and cooperation. I'll stop here and I'll invite the audience to ask a few questions. I request the audience members to post their questions in the chat and mention who the question is addressed to. Please keep your questions brief and to the point. We'll take the questions one by one. So I think we had a question earlier on. I think it was addressed to Dr. Ranjan. Let me just, yes, I think the first question I think is to Professor, is to Dr. Amit Ranjan by Ahmadul Haq, who says, most of the small states of South Asia are in a precarious position to navigate the Sino-Indian rivalry. In this regard, what should be the best adaptive agencies for the weak states? Dr. Ranjan, you may answer this question and then we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, this is a very serious situation, and which the smaller states, South Asian states, unfortunately have to navigate through. One thing which they can do, and especially when Bangladesh case, if I take that, most of the small states, if you look at Nepal or to extent Maldives or even Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, it was a personality. Hasina was a personality. It was a personality factor that mattered a lot. Even with Khalda Jia, it's a personality. Due to that, what happened that the relation between India and Bangladesh was not institutionalized. So it was all, for India also, Hasina and her coterie was everything, and vice versa. So that has to be taken care of as small states, because sometimes the political elites, power elites from those countries, they make it a personal ties with the bigger countries instead of having an institutionalized relationship. The same case happened with uh, uh, Maldives, like opposition and other. When I say institutional, it means a civil society, it means opposition, it means other actors. You know, to look at, we say that a state is a rational actor, but that's a Western theory. That's not our theory. In East, the entire thing is different. So we are not rational; we are relational. So when you look at the foreign policy making, you look at the decision making process. It's a relational. It's not a rational thing where many actors have to be involved and many actors have to be engaged with. While the rational actors, they say that okay, so you are rational, you sit alone, isolation, and then decide a thing. It's not like that. So therefore, I say that always institutionalized, which India and Bangladesh face with each other, because and even with Afghanistan, after Taliban came, nobody knows that with whom we have to talk. Same happened in 1999 when the aircraft from Nepal, I guess, nobody knew that to whom we have to talk. So at least there must be something, some link must be there for a small state, and this benefits even smaller states, also, not only the big states. Then there's a shelter theory. One term which I uh, ever heard, always hear, is balancing. Balancing is very costly business. It's a very costly thing. You cannot balance. Means to balance, you have to give to both partners, both equal powers. Suppose two big powers, India and China, are there in Maldives, and Maldives say that okay, so I am going to balance. So you have to satisfy both powers by giving. So that's a very costly activity. Then the state prefers to just go bandwagon, but that also at the self-respect. Then shelter theory is there. Uh, but still, what I believe that the smaller states, if they are democratic enough, if they are more institutionalized, if they link the biggest powers with institution way, and then they they look at their own interest, because when you balance and when you manage, it also depends on the bigger power whether they want to engage with you or not. So suppose you want to, a smaller country want to engage with a big country, but the bigger power says no, I don't want to engage with you, so I don't want to manage. So smaller countries, what I believe, they don't balance, they manage their interest, and that management of interest always depend upon the bigger power. It's a bigger power who have to decide that whether I'm going to engage with this country, their small country, and manage its interest or not. So it's their decision. So a better way to have a democratic small country, institutionalize your relation with the bigger power, and that has to be based solely on your interest, and let the bigger power decide instead of playing the game. You see, they have to understand that they cannot play games every time. You know, they may like Hasina. She was smart enough to manage calling that she's balancing the what they use, but at the end, what happened? Everyone knows. So you cannot uh, do every time everything. And the best way is to become more resourceful. That's all we need, to become more resourceful. Uh, as Sri Lanka is. Sri Lanka, once upon a time, Sri Lanka used to be, people used to say that Sri Lanka is going to be the next Singapore, because of its resources and because of the way it was managing itself. But then everything flopped and everything dumped. So that's a big uh, uh, issue. That's a big issue with smaller countries, and better to be more democratic and more resourceful. That is going to help anything.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan. I think we'll move to the next question. I think it's addressed to Shivam from Trishala S. In light of the revelations at the Pokhara airport, what does China gain by retroactively rebranding it as a BRI project, especially when public trust in such initiatives is being questioned? Shivam, I'll request you to give this answer in about a couple of minutes so that we can take as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Tushara. So I see, notwithstanding the current revelations, I think when China did co-opt it under the BRI in 2023, I think that was done with the intention, which I think we mentioned, was considering the fact that all the other projects, like the original 9 projects under the BRI, did not see any progress in terms of there being like any visible progress on the ground. I think at that time for China, Pokhara did seem like, an appropriate project to be presented as like a BRI project. It was built on Chinese loans, I think by China Exim Bank. And there was, even though now there are issues with India not granting air route access and everything, and some flights have begun in some capacity. So I think irrespective of all of that, it was still like some marker of, a project actually materializing in Nepal built on Chinese loans. So that kind of made 2 cases, I think, for the success of BRI, that, the major issue in Nepal in terms of BRI is the funding thing, that Nepal wants more grants while China was more keen on giving loans. And the fact that this project was built on loans, I think that it was functional, like maybe superficially functional on the face of it, but still functional in some respects. So I think that did seem like an opportune project for China to co-opt under BRI. But now, considering what has happened, the revelations about corruption and all the other allegations that have been made, I have not seen what the Chinese response to this has been. But I think now, obviously, this will further complicate the funding debate in Nepal, because it will further, it depends on how the leadership decides to take it forward and how actively they kind of want to like take this report and see what the issues have been, and then make sure that these kind of issues don't arise in other Chinese funded projects. So I think that we'll eventually see, like in the coming weeks, how it's being taken forward. But obviously, it will now further complicate the debate around funding of BRI projects in Nepal. Yeah.
Thank you, Shivam. I think Tekraj Koirala has a question for Omkar. India has denied air routes and refused to engage with the Bhairahava and Pokhara airports, citing security concerns. How do you see these actions by India impacting public perception in Nepal?
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it does have any major impact on public perception in Nepal, as it is not really closely connected to Nepali people's lives. And these projects from the start were perceived as very big ticket and having less impact on Nepali economy. So I don't really think it had a major fallout for India's perception. And there is some understanding within amongst Nepali population as well that India has some serious security concerns in the South Asian region, and it does act in its own interest whenever those security interests are threatened. So I don't really think it had any major fallout, but again, it depends on how domestically these issues are handled and how these issues are propped up as per different interests or stakeholders operating within Nepal. So yeah, I think.
I think I'll just ask one last question, which is going to be very, very brief, and I'll ask all our panelists just to answer this in under a minute as quickly as you can. So I think Dr. Ranjan pointed out something very interesting, which is about how relations and interactions between countries in South Asia is taking place on a more personalized level as opposed to institutional engagements. It drew my attention to SARC and BIMSTEC. I wonder how the panelists see the performance or the delivery of SARC and BIMSTEC in terms of development diplomacy outcomes. Dr. Ranjan, I think maybe you can address this first, and then we'll go.
Can you please repeat the SARC and BIMSTEC?
Yes, SARC and BIMSTEC as institutional vehicles to deliver development outcomes. I'm thinking specifically of the Motor Vehicles Act, the Coastal Shipping Agreement. All of these are examples of opportunities to deliver developmental outcomes that offer economic alternatives. How do you think these institutions have fared?
If you look at the SARC South Asia is the least integrated region of the world, and SARC was a better way. At least there was like nothing was moving, but at least the head of the states once in a year used to sit and have a tea, see each other's face, even if they don't like. At least they used to see each other's faces. So that has to be revitalized. It's very important. And looking at the statement, there was in March in front of a cabinet committee on no in front of the parliamentary committee on foreign policy. I think Jaishankar he stated that it's not like end of the SARC. So they are looking forward. It's a suspended motion, but given this India Pakistan ties at the present, I don't think it's going to start soon. Then after SARC was terminated, they we talked about BBIN, then BIMSTEC. If you look at the BIMSTEC is a very slow mover. It started once in 1997, and at present, it's only has 6 summit level meetings. So, and the charter was only approved in 2022 or 23 in Sri Lanka meeting. So it's a very slow mover, and it has potential. It's not that it doesn't have potential; it has potential. But then, there is also dispute. Like if you look at India, Bangladesh, the new dispute we have. Then there's a Bangladesh, Myanmar. They have also issue. Then for they talk about the project. They talk about peace, prosperity. But if you look at the Myanmar, and it's almost a zone with peace, conflict zone. They have turned under military. So to make a region, the first thing you have to do, whether it's a SARC, BIMSTEC or anything, you have to either resolve your dispute or you lessen the dispute in such a way that it doesn't harm the interest of the region. So unless you want to, dispute will come again and again. And when I say the dispute between the two member countries. With SARC, if you look at the example of SARC, India, Pakistan, they were in a different way. And in BIMSTEC, you have all these countries, all the member countries. Then to lead a organization, you need a leader. What a leader does: make compromises, ready to make compromises, ready to make some adjustment, and break the ties, break the ice between the other countries. So the issue is that who is going to lead? What's going to lead? If you look at the entire region of the world and regional organizations, they work in a way that that they resolve the dispute or they finalize the dispute. If you don't do it, there's going to be still going to be a problem. Peace is the first thing which we need. BBIN happened. BBIN Bhutan opposed that BBIN. It's not India or Bangladesh. Motor Vehicle Act. BBIN Motor Vehicle Act. And even if BBIN, what's the future of BBIN? We have to go to SARC. We have to resolve our issues. Otherwise, this is not going to end. Earlier, we used to talk about the Pakistan is a problem, but now we don't. India doesn't have even good ties with Bangladesh with the change of the government. That's going to become a big issue.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan. I think in the interest of time, I think we're really close. I think we've gone a little bit over time. So I'll ask Omkar, Shivam, and Dr. Deepak to quickly in 30 seconds probably address that question, and then we'll be able to wrap up. Omkar, why don't you go ahead?
I think while SARC and BIMSTEC work on more broader level, I feel initiatives like BBI and Motor Vehicles Agreement or like India, Nepal, Bangladesh transmission lines, initiatives like that will work better in integrating the region or bringing countries together on issues of common interest and common concerns and resolve them together. So I feel rather than just focusing on SAARC and in the BIMSTEC, I think these minilaterals will play a more crucial role going forward.
Thank you, Omkar. Excellent point there. Shubham, I'll again request you if you could under 30 seconds, that would be great.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Omkar said. I think even when I think we can look at both like BBI and MVA or like the tripartite Nepal, India, Bangladesh, like even if we consider them from an interim perspective, that our long-standing aim is to have a region where, you know, organizations like SAARC can effectively function, or BIMSTEC is functioning, but in the sense that, you know, these organizations can be successful in integrating the region further. I think in the interim, considering the kind of region that we're living in, I think these small issue-based partnerships do kind of at least deliver some progress. So I think the focus could be, you know, prioritizing these at the moment, wherever there is political will and kind of space to have such partnerships, but having not losing sight of the long-term objective, which is to kind of have a region where organizations like SAARC could be functional. So.
Thank you, Shivam. Dr. Deepak, I'll turn over to you. If you could under 30 seconds, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you again. I will be very specific. I'm not going into the SAR kind of mechanism. It's not going to work. BBIN, forget it. BIMSTEC, I agree with the previous speaker. Slowly, it can take a momentum, fine. But the new challenges I see is on the ecological or the climate issue, one, and the cyber issue. So we should focus on that. Can be bilateral or can be like, you know, the energy kind of issue. Yes, we are talking like, you know, India, Bangladesh, Nepal. There are possibilities that we can talk about, and forgetting this, you know, the jargons of the geopolitics and the geostrategic engagements, you know, the big things, you know, the turbulence, all these things. So we should focus on the climate issues or the environmental ecological issue. I know, like we have been discussing for like more than 3 decades about the human security. So the uncertainties are, you know, most you know, pressing and challenges in the climate issue, one, and at the same time on the digital world or the cyber world. So cyber attack on all that thing. So environmental degradation and cyber somewhere should be the new framework for kind of sub regional or bilateral trilateral kind of mechanisms from the security perspective. That's my point.
I want to make
Thank
one
you.
point. If you give me 1 second only, if you otherwise
really quickly, if you could, Dr. Ranjan. I think we're really out of time. So
no,
really
one
quickly,
point
if
I
you
want
could.
to make that otherwise, then you're saying that, you know, there's a big story of BCIM which we forgot. Means India, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar. We invested a lot, but what happened? It dead. It's almost died, almost dead. So we are not in that position.
Fair observation. Thank you, Dr. Ranjan. I think I'll hand over. I think that brings us to the end of our webinar. But before we go, I think I'll hand over to Vivek here to give the closing remarks. Vivek, over to you for the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vivek Dostapa, Program Coordinator and Research Associate at NICE. On behalf of both ORCA and NICE, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to everyone who joined us today for this very timely and engaging webinar. Firstly, I would like to express our gratitude to today's distinguished speakers. Mr. Omkar Bhole, we met briefly in Kathmandu a few months back. You were on a mission back then, and I think you have done a really good job and justice to the mission of exploring the public sentiment of Nepal towards India. Your explanation of some factors like the Agnipath scheme and the 2015 blockade were really spot on. And Dr. Bhatt, thank you for explaining the deep and interconnected yet complicated relationship that India and Nepal share, and also for highlighting the two-level game Nepal faces by pointing out the effects of various international factors on the external policies of Nepal. Dr. Amit Ranjan explained the Chinese reality in our region along with India's countermeasures really well. Ms. Sivam Sekhawat, thank you for highlighting the low-key efforts of India's development assistance projects. And I was really impressed by the part when you pointed out the BRI Silk Roadster program, because when I was talking to Chinese scholars and even Nepali scholars, most of them were really unaware of it. And a special thanks to our moderator, Mr. Rahul Karan Reddy, for steering the conversation so smoothly and making sure it stayed focused and insightful. To all the participants who joined us today, thank you for being here and for your thoughtful engagement and questions. Your presence truly made this session vibrant and more meaningful. I would like to thank the entire Orca and NICE team who were involved in this process for their continuous support. And we are very grateful for the continued collaboration between Orca and NICE. And we look forward to organizing more conversations like these in the future, and maybe even on a larger scale. So thank you once again. Rahul, back to you.
Thank you, Vivek. Just seconding what Vivek was just saying there, I'd like to thank all our panelists for their time and for their efforts in delivering a very nuanced, engaging session. I want to thank NICE for every effort they've made in putting this webinar together. It's come off really smoothly, all thanks to the team at NICE and the team at Orca. Before we conclude, I just want to draw our attention to the two reports that Orca has published regarding the public opinion surveys in Nepal. I request them to go through the Orca website and also draw their attention to some of the special reports and special analysis that is coming out in the next few months on Myanmar, domestic Chinese corruption, and Chinese democracy. We request you to follow our Twitter handles and our LinkedIn page to stay updated on what's to come next. That's it for this time. Thank you all for attending, and goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.